thought I would explain the Wim Hof method, not like how to do it, but exactly what's going on. So what is this type of breath work doing? And this is really interesting because this is more if you're interested in my teaching or my channel. A lot of people want to teach the Wim Hof method, or they want to teach breath work, or they want to teach an ability like or even a technique like the breath work. And I try and teach it so that you understand reality to a degree that the Wim Hof method becomes an obvious, like, no duh, of course I'm doing this. I don't need somebody to like tell me the technique. I want you to be able to see the breath, right? You need to be able to understand and see the breath such that it becomes obvious of like, oh, I need to do the Wim Hof method, or I need to do the breath techniques. Like, why am I doing controlled hyperventilation? Why am I doing a breath hold? Like, why is that confer positive benefits on me? What's happening? Like, people do the Wim Hof technique and they go, oh, I can see it's helping me. It's like benefiting me. Okay, well, let's help you see, like, why did somebody have to tell you that, right? That's where I'm going for. And so, like, if you truly understand the technique to where it's like, why would I pay money for, like, imagine like you're having this sensation in you and you don't know what's going on and you're just agitated, and somebody goes, you know what, you're thirsty, here's a glass of water, and you do the technique and you drink the glass of water and you're like, man, I feel better. I'll just do this glass thing and swallowing thing and gulping thing like 3 times a day for 10 minutes, and suddenly the thirst for water goes away. Right? That's where people are at with most breath work, is they're like, oh, what's going on? And like, for some reason, what they're doing with their breathing is not quenching their thirst. Like, the metabolic thirst is not being satiated, and so there's an agitation. And people go, here, drink this way, and you go, oh, I feel better. Right? But like deprivations of water causes this instantaneous thing, but like deprivations of breath cause a similar type of suffocating anxiety. Where if you drink at that level, the anxiety goes away. So when you're doing the breath hold, so to do any activity, right? When you're breathing, you're doing any activity. So this breath work generalizes to any activity. So the Wim Hof thing starts off with controlled hyperventilation of what you're doing. You're getting excited. When you get actually excited about something, your breathing starts to change, and you're kind of running you're excited about it. So you're trying to press yourself into the moment. So how do you press yourself into the moment? Like, actually push your lungs into the air. That generation of air pressure at the lung surface is pushing the whole body, the whole metabolism against the moment, just like something paddling. You're there, you're pressing into it. That's getting excited. So you're just choosing to get excited about something. Maybe it's surfing, maybe it's hunting, maybe it's fighting, maybe it's dating, maybe it's girls, maybe it's the opposite sex, maybe it's flirting with some sort of desire that you have, something that causes you to become engaged. But when you're doing breath work, you're throwing out the thing of like, oh, I'm just going to be engaged. So some people use jogging to get engaged. So you're engaging yourself. Scientifically, this looks like this purges the CO2 from your system. This purges, when you become engaged, you throw out the excuses to not be engaged. Right? You throw out, you go, I'm going to get rid of any of these notions of discomfort bothering me, of sacrifice bothering me. I'm going to get rid of all that, and I'm going to go for the thing that I desire. That's engagement. So what that looks like metabolically is that you're purging CO2 from your bloodstream. So with the breathing thing, this is the substrate of every activity that you're going to do. So you're going to see analogies and parallels in every single direction, from every single type of activity, every single type of instruction, to every single metabolic chain and path where there's going to be analogies, because you're trying to address things at a very fundamental level with breath work. Your breath, this metabolism that you have, is this big ocean of oxygen that you sort of exist in. Your body exists in this ocean of oxygen, and it draws all of its life from it. So it's full when it's at 100%. If you put an SpO2 monitor on you, it'll say 100%. I don't have one. If you hold your breath, that SpO2 will start to drop down. And so that's you in your breath, drinking in the breath. You're in your bloodstream, you're in your blood. And as the SpO2 drops down, it usually starts after about a minute or two. Go from 99, 98, 97, it'll drop down if you get an SpO2 monitor on yourself doing the Wim Hof method. It'll drop down, and as it does that, you are in your breath. You're in that, you are inside that reserve of oxygen that you have, right? Your every single metabolic reaction that you have, the electricity that's causing the perception of sight, the electricity that's causing the perception of the body, is dissolved in this water plasma fluid body thing that you have. And it's drinking in the oxygen. Your body's kind of at the bottom of it, and the oxygen's at the top, diffusing in at the lung membrane and into the blood. But it's all one water system. And so the blood, you're in it. And so as you just do a breath hold, you start to drink in that oxygen. You don't notice this. You don't notice that you're in it unless you discharge the blood, or unless you discharge the oxygen and actually drink it in. Actually drink it in instead of just sitting there at like a superficial level. So it'll drop down to whatever, 30. You'll get to 30% within 4 minutes. And that willingness to do the hyperventilation, the CO2 purge, the discomfort of any activity is mental. So the discomfort from breath work is mental, and it's a CO2 sensor. That's the only thing that gives you the, oh my God, I have to breathe. It's just a mental thing. It has nothing to do with the oxygen level or anything else. That just feels good. When you go into oxygen deprivation, or even CO2 overload or whatever with the breath, or metabolic pressure, as the blood loads up with too much of something or is deprived of something, right? The blood's like a spring. So anything that can be dissolved in it, or anything that can be extracted from it, loads the blood like an electrical spring, like a battery. And so as the oxygen is pulled out, that's not uncomfortable. That's just like it's being pulled taut. It's like, here's the blood full of oxygen, and then as you run out of oxygen, those bonds get pulled taut. They really want the air, they pull it in, so the whole thing gets stretched out. That just feels like a stretch. That doesn't feel good or bad. It can kind of maybe feel bad if you stretch too far, but it just feels like a stretch, like a chemical stretch. It's a sensation. It's not what causes the breath work to become, that's just the CO2 sensor in the head. So when you hyperventilate, the CO2 sensor doesn't turn on for quite a long time until you're in the stretch. And once you're in the stretch is interesting. So the CO2 alarm doesn't matter as much as long as the interest is placed on the stretch. And you can also even quiet or just pay attention less and less to the nervous system yourself, of sitting down on or squashing the ego or the self or the mental activity. That sense of self is the arena within which the CO2 alarm is going off. So you can be relaxed, more interested in the stretch of the O2, and then also be kind of suppressing or turning off that pesky guy telling you that you whatever. Because if you're actually breathing from the oxygen level and not from the CO2 can be like demanding the breath. The brain, the ego can demand the breath. But if you actually fall into the stretch, the oxygen, the true breath itself, that you're kind of floating in and out of, the breathing can start from there, and you're in this fluidic oxygen, so you're just going up and down with the surface. The breathing entirely changes. So a lot of times when people are extremely discharged, it's pulling down, and then so that first inhale is actually the surface coming back up. And then people will try and coach like, oh, now exhale and whatever. But actually, once you pull the blood taut with the first thing, breathe as the blood is breathing. Move as the blood is breathing. Move as the breath is breathing. And you'll find that there's different levels, and these correspond to different brainwave levels, alpha, theta, whatever. Like, as the breath slows down to that pitch, you're dropping into potentially theta, getting REM sort of stuff, and you're seeing deeper aspects of your breath. It's deeper aspects of yourself. When you move, like when you try, be it running or doing like darts or dancing, when you go deep into yourself with the breath like that, then you'll start reflexively moving from that depth, and you go, oh, skill increase. I feel better. I responded better in that situation. I was there. I was deeply present with my children. How? Well, because I found I was deeply present in the breath. And so the Wim Hof thing is just one way. It's just following that pattern of like engagement, removal of excuses, and falling into what's truly interesting in the moment, in the heart. What's in the heart? Oh, your interest, your passion. Okay, well, what am I doing with the breath work? I'm basically changing how my blood is. I'm becoming interested in my blood. I'm becoming interested in the substance of my heart. So when anybody does that in any way whatsoever, they get healthier, they enjoy life more. And if people are not interested in the substance of their heart, if they're interested in something else, it's usually miserable and suffering. So breath work is just becoming interested in the substance of the heart. If you dig into this a little bit more, it's the ether. Right? You can start to think from and analyze the world from this level. And you'll see a different type of science. You'll see a different type of, like everything. But that's all the Wim Hof method is doing. I don't think it should be done with like timing. Like, who cares how long you held your breath? What are you trying to do? You're trying to shift the condition of your blood, and to change your relationship with yourself, or change the relationship with your ego. So like, oh, I made it 10 minutes. I made it 5 minutes. I didn't breathe. I did breathe. Like, screw all that. Like, what are you trying to do with the breath? You're trying to shift the blood, and you're trying to like make the ego go off in a way that you can contest with it via the CO2 alarm. Like, shut that thing off. Like, if you can learn how to ignore your CO2 alarm, not to some pathological level where you hold your breath so long that you die, or you ignore your CO2 alarm in a dangerous situation and drown in the ocean doing the Wim Hof method, or in your bathtub, right? People shouldn't be doing that. People shouldn't be like, it's fine, but the ignoring the CO2 alarm is also the way that you ignore negative self-talk, the way that you ignore passions, lusts, false beliefs, peer pressure. Like, the same way that you ignore all that bullshit is the exact same way that you ignore your CO2 alarm. So it's very healthy to practice ignoring that thing, because then if it can't control you in that situation, it's not going to be able to control you in the other situations. So your impulse control and your self-control improves. But you want to be understanding that's what you're doing, because it's why I see so many people doing this stuff and not really truly grasping what they're doing. And it's borderline aggravating. And then ultimately, it's also like you're not going to be able to do the breath work any better than you're doing it anywhere else in life. So if you're not like getting better at ignoring your ego or whatever in any particular situation, your breath work isn't going to progress. If you're not interested in the substance of your heart, you're not going to be able to actually drop into the substance of your heart in the breathing. You'll start to panic or be too stressed out, and it'll never drop below like 93%. You'll find that the practice or the discipline won't move forward. It won't increase because it's all tied together in one big thing. Like breath work doesn't solve anything because it's just one gear in a system of dozens of interconnected gears that all only turn with each other. So sometimes, like, I guess the breath would be a pretty big gear, right? You could use the breath to grab all of the gears for sure, but you can't be actively using another gear and pushing in an opposite direction than you would like your breath work to take you. Then things don't go anywhere. Like, you can definitely use techniques to like move the whole system by grabbing a particular part. But unless opposition to progress, unless all the beliefs and oppositions and desires and all that other nonsense is let go of, then the breath work can't work. Now, I mean, off topic, but this also gets into like how traditional Orthodox Christianity is different than other techniques and spiritual systems that are like based off of a technique, right? A lot of religions are based off of like, do this, and by doing that you'll know reality, you'll heal, or you'll know oneness, your chakras are open, you'll ascend. And it's mostly based off of these techniques. And it's like, yes, grab the technique is based on reality, that's true. Use the technique to turn the gears and alter the system. And you have to learn how to do that. But if there's a part of you that's grabbing another part of the system and working against it, like working against the good that you're trying to do with the technique, then it's silly. It's one person fighting, it's two people fighting over a stick. So with Orthodoxy, it's entirely upon the relationship with the good. Do you have if your relationship with the good is okay, then the good that you attempt to accomplish with a technique, you won't fight it. You won't fight yourself, right? Like, imagine you're trying to do breath work, but you have the wrong political ideology. You have the wrong scientific understanding. You have the wrong understanding of physiology. You have the wrong understanding of psychology. And if you adamantly believe those wrong things and those fields are true, and you defend them, right? If you're an activist, if you're some sort of activist and you're wrong-headed, then that activism will be pushed against any internal technique that you do, any spiritual technique, any breathwork technique. You will be fighting against it, and it just causes confusion and psychosis. So sacramental Christianity, the original stuff, is just designed to get the relationship with God correct, so that then the techniques can work, and that's the primary and most important thing. Every other system is like kind of a system of like what to believe and whatever else, and Orthodox Christianity is primarily, this isn't necessarily something to believe or do, even though there kind of is dogma. People come up with the wrong idea or get this the wrong way. People have laid down like, oh, that's a heresy or that's wrong about the nature of God. But learning about the nature of God is not the fundamental premise and purpose of Orthodox Christianity. It is the actual relationship with God. And then through that relationship, you could find out all the things that you need to know about God. And before you establish that relationship, it's probably good that you don't believe the wrong things about him. It's such that there's like the constraint of dogma and the notion of heresy. But just believing the correct dogma and not committing heresy is not a relationship with God. And it's so easy to be like mad or ungrateful or frustrated or any of these things at any particular moment, and then you're fighting against any of the goodness you might be trying to do with your breath work. And so most of the issues that people are actually struggling with that like interfere with breath work, that interfere with spiritual work, are hot button political, social issues. Physiological issues. Most of the things that are preventing people from actually accessing health through their breath, it's not just the technique, it's all this other like insane stuff. Any wrong-headed belief that's strongly believed will prevent the breath work from working, and so these things are actually killing people. Believing the wrong stuff kills you, because it prevents the breath from going in. Every single lie belief prevents the breath from going in. That's why so many spiritual systems are like, stop knowing, let go of everything, stop understanding. It's like it's okay to have an understanding, but it's like it's almost too risky. Before you're healthy enough to have a good breath and to think with any vitality, like it's better to just not think. It's better to not have any attachment to any of those ideas. And if you know, you're like, man, yeah, I'm at it. I don't have like my health, my anxiety, my like, well, like if you get that that's that way, then it's like that's the position is like you're probably not thinking the right way about something, and any whatever activism you're doing is coming from a place of panicked suffocation rather than any real insight. So that's what the Wim Hof method is doing, which is I would describe the Wim Hof method to be anything that depends on a controlled hyperventilation to allow one to kind of like jump or dive into the metabolism, into the breath by discharging the oxygen in the blood. And then that discharge of the oxygen pulls the breath and the metabolism taut. It causes this strong magnetic bond or linkage between a lot of different things that are, metaphorically and literally represented by the air and the blood and water and the cells and the desire of the body and the perception, right? Perception, I'm seeing things. That perception is drawing oxygen out of the air, right? My perception, my sight, my visual sight, there's light. Like my eyes are perceiving, the nerves are firing. My eyes are receiving light. That light is being converted into the frequency of neural impulses that are happening. Thousands and millions of neural impulses are flying into my optic nerve, into my brain, interacting with the rest of my nervous system. All of that activity is drawing oxygen out of the air. It actually has a desire or a draw for it. For as long as we are alive, our perception is a desire for life. Perception itself has a magnetic attraction to the air, the molecule. It's the reason for the breath. It's drawing the oxygen out of the blood. Among other things, but it's one of them. And so if you desaturate the perceptions which are drawing oxygen out of the blood, as the blood loses oxygen, that draw, that connection, that tension between the perception, the tension between the sight and the air becomes stronger. It gets more and more tense. It becomes more and more linked, like two magnets getting stronger and stronger. They have a desire for each other. The perception desires the breath. So that desire pulls them together magnetically. They're actually connected, and you feel more whole, more at one with everything, more connected to what you want already, right? You want oxygen. You let your oxygen get so low that you feel a connection to it before you even take it in, right? So just in the breath, you can explore this idea of having a connection with what you already want fully, by giving up, by suffering, by letting go of the idea of me suffering, by moving through the CO2 alarm and all that stuff. You can get to this point of deprivation, of asceticism, of discipline, to where lack has caused a non-physical, instantaneous connection with the very thing that you believe yourself to be lacking. And this truth, or this arrangement, is the fundamental pattern of how existence operates. And so just kind of anything that's exploring that repeatedly, you know, you could call that the Wim Hof method, right?